What's going on, everyone? Brezzy43. I'm back after a long hiatus from VGC. I attended my first regional, the Milwaukee regional that just happened last weekend. I had a ton of fun. Really, really awesome event, really well ran. Very similar to what I was expecting it to be in terms of the actual layout. I've had some experience competing at other events that had similar layouts. But this was my first actual Pokemon VGC event, so I was really grateful for the experience. I will be trying to go back when I can, hopefully with a more tested team here. But what I originally had intended to do was to record a series of videos of my team building process. I had some time in between classes that I was going to dedicate some time to the actual process of building. Unfortunately, I ended up busier than I thought. I only recorded like 3 or 4 videos, and they were all over the place. Couple were really short, couple were really long. Just overall, not great content. But I did play a lot more sporadically throughout that time, and I managed to test and settle on a team for Milwaukee. Now, this was really interesting to me because I had done a lot of testing prior to it, around 100 to 150 games on Showdown across all variations of the team. And I had a lot of success. I got multiple Showdown accounts up over 1650 into the high 1600s, low 1700s. And I was doing pretty well. I liked where the team was at. It was even open team sheet as well, which is something that means that you have to play well, knowing all the opponent's tools that they have, and them knowing all that you have. And then I get to the event and I go 2-3 and leave day one. I had some other obligations that I had to go take care of, and I had commuted into Milwaukee that morning, so I had to drive back and everything. So unfortunately, couldn't stick around past there unless I had continued winning. But I went 2-3. One of my losses was to my opponent. One of my opponents had Fissure Ting Lu, and they clicked it on turn one both games, and both games had hit. So, actually, excuse me, I think we went to 3 games. I think I won one of the games that he fissured my YawnDozo, but very difficult when your opponent just takes out your bulkiest Pokemon in one attack. But I wonder how many more they hit during the game. It's just one of those things, if you want to run a high variance move, sometimes you'll get lucky, which my opponent did. But the other two opponents just outplayed me relatively, and also had teams that had slight tweaks that I was not prepared for. So going into the event, I figured I wanted to play some YawnDozo. I thought YawnDozo was uniquely positioned. I saw some people who had been playing the team for a long time, who had found ways to make it work in this metagame. The metagame is very offensive. You have really strong physical attackers paired with Chien Pao. You also have very strong special attackers paired with Chi Yu. And it can be really difficult to position your YawnDozo in that environment. But the biggest takeaway was that I wanted to have my YawnDozo function both modes, with and without Tatsugiri, essentially. Similarly, I wanted to be able to bring Tatsugiri without YawnDozo. I don't think I ever actually did that in most of my games, but I wanted them to actually function as standalone Pokemon, which I think is the main challenge of building YawnDozo Tatsugiri. Secondly, I wanted to change up the YawnDozo set slightly. So let's shift over here and look at this YawnDozo. So this was an inspiration from a couple of different builds that I sort of fused all into one, and I really liked where this YawnDozo landed. The Leftovers Oblivious set, a lot of players have shifted over to Oblivious because you don't need Unaware for the mirror, because the mirror is way less common now. There are still Pokemon that are setting up moves, but you have Yawn, which can force them to switch. So you don't. I didn't feel like I needed Unaware. I felt like Oblivious was great. It allowed me to sit in front of Intimidate users and also not be taunted, which is really important. So you can just continue to spam Yawn. Additionally, Pokemon like Gyarados and Arcanine don't really do that much to you. They can status you, but if you don't bring Tatsugiri and you don't plan on going into the YawnDozo mode, this YawnDozo still did decent damage with being burned. Terra Steel Heavy Slam was here for a couple of reasons. Without being Terra Grass, I didn't really like Terra Grass. I know it's pretty strong, but I felt like it was exploitable by good players. A lot of players I was running into online just had their game plan into YawnDozo was just hit it with really, really strong attacks with either Chi Yu or Chien Pao on the field to reduce its bulk. And that usually is good enough to get the job done, especially when you're dealing with focus sashes and opposing terrasilizations. And so I decided to throw away the Terra Grass and go Terra Steel, and use Heavy Slam as a means of pressuring Fluttermane and Iron Bundle, both of which take a lot of damage from Heavy Slam. Most of the no bulk invested Fluttermanes faint to the Heavy Slam from this attack investment. They have to be running a good amount of HP and I think a little bit of the defense. I don't remember exactly, but this was all of the Fluttermanes that are just max speed with no bulk, they faint to it. The modest Fluttermanes with only HP investment also faint like a favorable roll for you. So this was solid. And Yawn was honestly the best. I clicked Yawn a ton of times. I clicked Yawn 88 times across the 30 games that were just in this test sheet alone. So Yawn was excellent for me. I really enjoyed using it. It forces a lot of action. And you still, if you lead YawnDozo next to a partner Pokemon, you can force Yawn switches, which your opponent sees on the team sheet. But also, they always have to be respecting the fact that you have that you could have Tatsugiri in the back and you could switch into it. So that brings me to Tatsugiri. This was sort of a meme set. I don't think that Bright Powder is very good. But I was struggling to find an item. I was originally using the Choice Scarf variation, and I think that variation is decent. But my biggest complaint with the Choice Scarf is that it felt inflexible to me. I think Tatsugiri actually has decent bulk, and it has a pretty high special attack stat. So I wanted to have a way to actually lean into it, investing it in this way, and maybe potentially catching some people off guard with their calcs. Choice Scarf is the most popular, so I was fainting to a lot of things. I was fainting to Sucker Punch from Life Orb Chin Pao. I was fainting to Extreme Speed from Terra Normal Choice Band Arcanine. Both of this EV spread survives both of those, as well as Ice Spinner from Chin Pao. So it was just, I felt like this was a bit better of a set. Terra Steel as well. It's the best defensive Terra. The moves are pretty straightforward. I skipped over YawnDozo's EV spread. Let me just go over it really quick. This HP stat gives you an extra point in recovery for leftovers. This is 15, I believe. And that's why I hit that number. You could potentially go up all the way to 244. That gives you another point in your... That hits 256 stat, which gives you another leftovers recovery. But I actually valued a little bit of speed here, and I'll tell you why in a second. So we talked about the attacks investment, 1 point value just to get that to an even number for the boosts, and so we don't waste any EVs. Max special defense, this was really crucial, especially with Chi-Yu on the team. You just need to make sure that you can survive double ups from things, and a lot of times people will double you up. You kind of have to play with this team for a little while in order to get a feel for what people tend to go for when you lead certain things. And I found that when I lead YawnDozo Chi-Yu, I found that my opponents more often than not targeted down my YawnDozo, especially if their lead was something like Chi-Yu and Bundle. They would just go after the YawnDozo, predicting the Tatsugiri predicting the Chi-Yu to either protect or switch. So you can use that information how you will, but really important to be max special defense. And then this speed investment was just here to hit 134 stat, which was the most common Arcanine speed stat that I found that we could actually feasibly outspeed at +2. I didn't want to go for max speed. I felt like that was too many EVs that I wasn't willing to give up. And this outsped most things from the Palafin balance teams, as well as everything that it falls in that range. With the meta being so bulky and balance centric, there's a lot of Pokemon that aim for that speed range, that 134 and below. Usually you see like 114 to 130-ish is really crowded with a lot of Pokemon. So this outsped those at +2, which was really nice. Tatsugiri EV spread, nothing fancy here. We just EV'd for the nature jump, the second nature jump at 156, max HP, and then I just threw the rest into bulk. There was you could go faster if you want to. It doesn't really matter. But in terms of the item, I think Citrus Berry would probably be better if I would go back and change it up. Bright Powder triggered for me online a bunch, as on cartridge and on Showdown, but it didn't trigger for me at all in the event. I think there was 3 or 4 attacks that my Tatsugiri took, and it didn't dodge any of them. So I think we landed on Bright Powder mostly as a joke. I was, like I said, I was tired of using Choice Scarf. I put Focus Sash on the Pokemon and it never triggered because I wanted to have these EVs. I didn't want to go max speed, max special attack. So because I wanted to go bulky, I was looking at some other items, and my friend jokingly suggested Bright Powder since he wanted me to run Wide Lens, and I was not going to run Wide Lens. So instead, we ran Bright Powder. The moveset is pretty standard outside of Helping Hand. I think Muddy Water and Draco Meteor are just a little too good to pass up. If you want a 100% accurate option, you could substitute Draco Meteor for Dragon Pulse, or you could substitute Helping Hand for something like, I think this thing gets Chilling Water. Maybe it doesn't. It does get Chilling Water. You could run Chilling Water on it. It doesn't really get that many great moves. Nasty Plot's okay. Taunt is decent. Terra Blast is fine. But I ran Helping Hand because of the end games most of the time. I wanted to be able to Helping Hand boost really all 4 of these remaining Pokemon, but for sure 3 of them, not including Glimmora, just because it doesn't usually come up to Helping Hand boost Glimmora. But all 3 of the other ones appreciate a boost, and it can be really nice to avoid or to get something off if you're predicting your opponent to extreme speed you or sucker punch you or something. You can get around it that way. So I wanted to have a 100% accurate move, and this boosting the damage of its allies was pretty decent. Next, we have Chi-Yu. Terra Grass here with safety goggles. Not really redundant. The Terra Grass was my nod to the Palafin balance teams. That was its primary role on the team. Spoiler, I played against that team at Milwaukee multiple times, and both of my losses that were not Fissure Ting-Lu were to that team. And it was because they were running Ting-Lu and Iron Hands. This team struggles immensely with both of those Pokemon together on the same team. You don't do a lot of damage without setting up with this team, and for that reason, you kind of need to have an answer to those Pokemon, and I haven't quite figured out what that answer is for my team yet. I'm still working out the logistics, but this Chi-Yu was outstanding for me in testing. I used it. I won 16 of 19 games bringing it. I brought YawnDozo all 30 games, but I brought Chi-Yu 19 times. I won 16. I terastallized it 9 times and won all 9 times that I terastallized it in those last 30 games. And Terra Grass was excellent. It was very good against the traditional Palafin balance teams that typically have the Baxcalibur or Dragonite on the team rather than Iron Hands, because you can power through the Ting-Lu with your Yawn spam plus Nasty Plot spam getting Terra Grass going. But it's really difficult when your opponent, both of my opponents led Ting-Lu and Iron Hands on turn 1 and terastallized their Ting-Lu into Terra Water. So it's just really difficult for this thing to take those types of attacks right away, especially when it has to Nasty Plot. It doesn't have to Nasty Plot, but it does help when you get Nasty Plot, because then it truly sweeps. So looking back at the event, now that the metagame has kind of shifted into a lot of these Iron Bundle teams as well as these Iron Hands Ting-Lu teams, I think Chi-Yu is in a bit of a trickier spot on this team specifically. I think that I need to address some weaknesses with this Pokemon if I want to continue moving forward with this team. May readdress it in Regulation D. I'm not sure yet, but the moves were great. Heat Wave, Nasty Plot, Dark Pulse. If you want to run a 100% accurate option instead, you could run Flamethrower. I just really liked the spread capabilities of this Pokemon after a Nasty Plot. EV-wise, nothing special. Just hits that second nature jump +1 for the even number for Nasty Plot. This was, I think, actually it was this. I don't recall. Maybe I did this. Anyway, this speed was to outspeed the majority of Chi-Yu that are not timid. This is the fastest modest Chi-Yu that I've seen. And then the rest was just dumped into bulk. Nothing special about it, really. But I liked this Pokemon in testing. I liked it after Milwaukee. It was pretty rough for me in Milwaukee against those teams. So really, really good against the Palafin balanced teams that are the traditional ones with Baxcalibur or Dragonite. Really difficult into Chien-Pao, stuff plus Iron Handling Tinglu. Next up is this Fluttermane here, and this was honestly my favorite Pokemon on the team, specifically because of the set that I decided to run. I had seen this set on a... Whoops, excuse me, this is not correct. That's what it is. That's why it's a little spicier. I saw this Fluttermane or something similar to it kicking around on some Japanese teams in the Best of One Ladder series. I think Ray Rizzo did a video on it as well. And they were running Booster Energy Speed Booster with Hex. And the reason why Hex is pretty decent on this team is because you have two forms of status. You have YawnDozo with Yawn, and you have Glimmora, who we'll talk about in a moment. So you have multiple ways of statusing your opponents, and additionally, when Substitute is a really nice way to take advantage of the pressure that YawnDozo puts on people. You get to Yawn spam setting up nasty plots with Chi-Yu or Substitute with Fluttermane, and this is just a really strong Pokemon in the end game because it comes in after the dust is settled a little bit, and typically something on the opponent's side is statused that can take a huge chunk of damage from Hex. Substitute's great to punish defensive plays, like I said, set up during the Yawn cycling, as well as against Trick Room teams and other, early passive turn ones. You can just set up a sub, and then you're in decent position to go into the next turn starting Trick Room. Moonblast, just because it's the strongest move. You do forfeit Dazzling Gleam here, which is something that is important to note. Dazzling Gleam is really strong for the spread damage, but this Fluttermane is more in line with end gaming through Hex and then Moonblast to fill in the gaps. That's how this one typically performed, but I just really liked the offensive pressure that it put on while still also having the defensive synergy with Substitute. Terra Water was a last-minute change. I ran Terra Fire for a while. I think I ran Terra Water in these last handful of games. Yeah. Don't need to Terra this thing very often. Terra Water came up specifically against the Chin Pao teams and against the Palafin Balance teams. Being able to take a Terra Water Jet Punch from Palafin is a pretty nice trade-off if you also Terra. The EV spread, I actually think this is incorrect. I think I took a little bit out here for some more defense. I think that I had a calc in mind with Chin Pao Sucker Punch when I Terra. Well, either way, you would take it the same, but Terra Water in that matchup is important because it resists ice. And I think I ran more defense than what I had there, but I'll leave it as this for now. This EV spread I know survives Jet Punch from non-terastallized Palafin without having to Terra Water yourself. It just takes neutral Jet Punch always, which is pretty nice. And then I think, like I said, that I think the actual team that I'm going to share at the end of this had something closer to this. This speed stat outspeeds all modest Fluttermanes. Gets you to that threshold where they have to be timid to be faster than you. And with Booster Energy +1, you outspeed basically everything that's not Booster Energy Bundle. 116 HP gives you a number that's good for Substitute. You want to have a number that is 4 N + 1 effectively. So we have 144 here, which allows us to substitute. If you think about it like this, 144 divided by 4 is 36. So this going one higher than that means that you're going to get to substitute 4 times and then have 1 HP remaining. That's the logic here. So that did come up one time in one of my testing events where to get through a Sucker Punch lock, I subbed 4 times. Or it was like sub plus something attacking me and breaking my sub. So being able to sub 4 times and get down to 1 HP while your partner Pokemon's attacking, it can come up. It's not super common, but it can. Ultimately loved this Fluttermane. I'm going to carry this over with me into Regulation D, I think, as the ways to status people continue to grow with some returning villains in Regulation D. I'm gonna keep trying with Hex. This move hits so hard. For those of you that don't know, it does double the power of the move if the target is statused. So it's a 130 base power ghost move if the opponent is slept or poisoned. Which brings us to Glimmora. Glamora has been a staple of these YawnDozo teams for quite a while. Typically, you see them here because it's a great way for YawnDozo to take advantage of the boosts. You set up toxic spikes on your opponent's side, or you mortal spin them, and you poison them that way. And you get to take advantage of that with YawnDozo, with all the protects that you have, with the leftovers recover. You can stall out through some Pokemon, which is my game plan for some of the trickier Pokemon to deal with, is to try to status them early. So Glamora was great. This was a bit of a unique EV spread. Credit to Ray Rizzo on this one. I tried it out after his video and I loved it. I thought it was excellent. I thought about skimping on some EVs. I think that if you drop down to around here, you can outspeed. You can still outspeed most everything without outspeeding other timid Glamoras, but I didn't want to risk it. I didn't want to have that come up, so I went max speed. The bulk was great. I didn't feel like I needed to be bold. I know that some people have run bold before, but I really valued the speed to get off those mortal spins faster. This is the fastest Pokemon on my team without booster energy, which is just interesting for those, excuse me, not Fluttermane, but it is faster than Chi-Yu. So it's interesting to think about with everyone, you know, not running speed boosting natures and dropping their speed, you can actually outspeed base 100s, maybe even potentially slightly faster Pokemon with a timid max speed Glamora. Moves are pretty standard outside of Mortal Spin, Earth Power, Energy Ball, Power Gem. Earth Power so you don't get walled by Steel types. Energy Ball so you get a little extra offense when you Terrasilize Grass, and then Power Gem for your best stab move. The Grass Terra was great defensively and offensively. You can bring this thing into Palafin Balance teams. You can bring it into Tinglu Iron Hands. And overall, a solid Pokemon for this archetype. One of the interesting things that I wanted to note here is I did actually do some testing with Corrosion. The reason why is Amoonguss is on every team. And for those of you that don't know, if Toxic Spikes are set up on your opponent, on either player's side of the field, if they switch in a Poison type, it removes the Toxic Spikes. So it was a bit of a frustrating endeavor at times to go through the work of sacrificing a Pokemon effectively for 1 or 2 layers of Toxic Spikes and some damage on their active Pokemon to have them switch into Amoonguss and remove the spikes. Corrosion with Mortal Spin allows you to actually poison types, which is really interesting. It was something that I ended up using this Pokemon in a specific way against some of the Chien Pao teams that made me switch back to Toxic Debris. But I think Corrosion is something that should not be slept on. I think it's actually pretty decent, and I would recommend giving it a try for anyone using Glamora. Lastly is Dragonite. This Pokemon's not a stranger to these YawnDozo teams. This particular set is a bit different. I would strongly encourage you not to use this set, and I'll explain why here in a second. So Dragonite is really, really nice on these teams because it gives you the threat of immediate offense with the choice band variations that other people have used. You can take advantage of just going for crazy amounts of damage early or late game to clean up. Really, really good at that with the choice band set. But for the same reasons as I did not want to use Choice Scarf Tatsugiri, I did not want to use Choice Band Dragonite. I'm not good at using choice items myself. I need more practice with them. I find myself in situations where I have to choose a move to lock into that I have to lock into for the rest of the game. And obviously there could have been something earlier in the game that I could have done differently, but ultimately I did not want to run the choice item. And additionally, 2 things that I really valued as I started testing other Dragonites. One was switching moves was really nice. Just letting it sit on the field and switch up attacks every so often. I've noticed that during my testing with Assault Vest. And secondly, I wanted a move that could actually punish my opponents for trying to get out of the Yawn lock. So what I mean by the Yawn lock is that Yawn is a move that puts the target to sleep after a delayed, so one turn delayed sleep. Your opponent can get rid of this by switching out. So they grow drowsy the first turn. If they choose to stay in, they fall asleep. Typically, if you can get a Yawn off without taking a significant amount of damage on your active Pokemon, your opponent will be forced to make a defensive play, usually. I say usually because there's always an exception. Some players will go for reads and predict you to not protect your DyawnDozo and try to knock it out really fast before going to sleep. That happened in one of my games. But more often than not, your opponents will switch out, because if they stay in and you go for protect and they don't do anything for the turn and then they go to sleep, they're in a really, really bad position. So it's one of those situations of, do you stay in and try to take a knockout and risk them protecting and fall asleep, or do you make the safe play and switch out? Because of this, one of the most common ways that people will try to break the lock is by either switching in something that can go to sleep and wake up afterwards, like Lumberry Pokemon or Chestoberry DyawnDozos, or whatever. They're going to set, one of my Grimmsnarl opponents set Misty Terrain preemptively, so I couldn't yawn. But ultimately, they have to get into this mode where they're making a defensive play, or they're attacking one Pokemon per turn and switching out the other one. So I wanted to have a way to punish them for switching every turn and potentially playing defensively. So that's where Dragon Dance came in. I originally was running a Terra Flying Dragonite with Terra Blast instead of Aerial Ace. I loved the damage that set did, especially after a Dragon Dance. There was a lot of things that just could not sit in front of Dragonite anymore. But I found that if you don't Terrastalize that Dragonite, it is very close to useless. Extreme Speed can never be Stab. Low Kick is doing the same amount of damage either way, but you don't have a flying move, so you can't pressure anything with a Stab move. You want to run like Dragon Claw or an additional move instead. So for that reason, I wasn't confident playing with it. I think in my games, I switched to Terra Flying Dragonite for the last couple of games. I made this switch around here, and then I tried to bring it as often as I could. And I loved Low Kick, loved Extreme Speed. Aerial Ace, though, really, really, really sad calc. Aerial Ace does not KO Amoonguss. And I did not stat that with my EV spread until after the event. So really fast. So not choice band. I'm 204. I'm at +1. And then there's an Amoonguss over here. As you can see, whoops, Aerial Ace. As you can see, it does not KO defense boosted Amoonguss with a very standard EV spread. Nothing fancy here. If we switch it to a special defense boosted, it still doesn't KO. And so for that reason, as soon as it happened at Milwaukee, where my +1 Aerial Ace did not KO an Amoonguss, I was off of Aerial Ace. Unless you go back to Choice Band. If you go back to Choice Band, I think Aerial Ace is fine, because you're going to be doing that damage from the get-go. You don't have to set up a Dragon Dance for it. But typically, Dragonite will get chipped in Dragon Dance, and you want to start picking up knockouts after the turn that you Dragon Dance, and Aerial Ace is just not it for that. I valued normal Terra a bit more than Flying Terra as well, because it sort of functions defensively for Dragonite. The only weakness that normal has, Dragonite is good against prior to Terrastalizing, and you can get rid of your flying typing so you don't take damage from bundle and the like. So that's the team. Relatively straightforward. Against some of the common modes of the team, just to give you an overview, I led DyawnDozo a lot. Like I said, DyawnDozo Chi-Yu is a solid lead. You can go for nasty plots. You can go for just straight damage right away. DyawnDozo Dragonite is also a fine lead if your opponent's team is weak to Dragonite. I like to use this Pokemon against some of the non-traditional, or the new balance is what it's called, the Gyarados Chi-Yu teams. I like to lead Dragonite and then switch it out if I have to. But typically they can't do a lot against you. Typing-wise, it matches up really well into those balanced teams. Arcanine, Amoonguss, Palafin, or Gyarados, Chi-Yu, Amoonguss. Those Pokemon will struggle to remove this Pokemon a lot of the time. And additionally, some of the really strong ground attackers like Garchomp and Great Tusk I like Dragonite against. Glimmora is a great tool in the DyawnDozo mirror match. I try to bring it early if I suspect they're going to lead DyawnDozo early. If they don't lead DyawnDozo early, I try to preserve it. It's really important to preserve that Pokemon and use it to answer the DyawnDozo. I don't actually think I brought Tatsugiri all that much in testing. I only brought it to 8 of my 30 games on the last team, but I won 6 of those 8. So you have to think about Tatsugiri as more of a defensive boost for this Pokemon, for this team, rather than offensive boost. So if you're typically against the Chien-Pao Dragonite offensive teams, I will do something like YawnDozo Glamora, and then I'll bring Tatsugiri Fluttermane, or if Fluttermane doesn't match up well against what they have, I will lead YawnDozo Dragonite and bring Tatsugiri Glamora in the back. And the idea is to just start getting the damage in that you can, defensively switch to Glamora so it sets up spikes so you can start statusing things, breaking the Chimpow's Focus Sash, etc. And then finding that crucial moment to bring in the Tatsugiri, boost your defenses so you survive a couple of really strong attacks and hit something back really hard with Heavy Slam or Wave Crash and try to get to that end game. 2v2, if you can get that matchup to a 2v2 and one of your two is Fluttermane that's boosted its speed, you usually win that. Obviously, it can come down to protect plays and whatnot, but because of the EV spread on the Fluttermane, you survive most of Chien-Pao's attacks. Against the balanced teams, YawnDozo, Chi-Yu with Fluttermane, and then your choice of any of these other 3 is fine. One of the strong recommendations I would give for piloting this team is to read the team sheets. Immediately look at the team and say, look at it and ask yourself, what do they have that answers YawnDozo? Do they have anything? Do they have Haze Palafin or Haze Murkrow? Do they have Clear Smog on something? Do they have Perish Song? Do they have really strong attackers? Like, what are they going to do to actually beat the YawnDozo? If they have nothing, I would strongly encourage you to bring Tatsugiri, especially in the best of 3 format. Bring it at least once. Force them to think about it. Force them, like, show it to them in situations as well. Some of my best of 3 testing, that was the strongest part about the team 2, is showing them Tatsugiri in game 2, but not in game 1, and then they have to wonder if you're going to bring it in game 3. You can play it like an ace in the hole a lot of the time. But play some games with the team if you're going to get some reps figuring out when you're supposed to bring in Tatsugiri, when you're not. I did a big laddering session on cartridge last night, and I actually made it to top 50 on cartridge. I went on like a 20 win, 3 loss streak to get from Ultra Ball from Great Ball up to top 50. I don't know how many people are still playing this format, so maybe it's not that impressive, but I was bringing Tatsugiri a lot last night, and the closed team sheet, it's really strong. They don't know your terrestrialization type. They don't know you have Yawn. They don't know any of your sets, so you can use that to your advantage. But the default mode of the team is YawnDozo with partner, Fluttermane in the back, and then your choice of Tatsugiri or something else in the back. One of the modes that I used a lot last night that I found really strong was YawnDozo, Glamora, Tatsugiri, Fluttermane. Get your status going early, play defensively, let the poison do its work, and then Fluttermane cleans up with Hex in the end game. So I've rambled long enough here. I hope you all enjoyed the team. I loved it. I'm gonna sunset this team for now. May take some inspiration with me into Regulation D, but I have a rental code for you all if you want to try it. The rental code is on screen now. So let me know what you think in the comments below. It's been a while since I've posted. I hope to do some more posting for Regulation D. I'll try my best. But if you do try out the team, leave a comment. Let me know. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you aren't. Helps me a ton. And I will see you all in the next video.